Simon sat in his signature black leather chair, arms crossed, legs stretched out, the familiar glow of the stage lights reflecting off his glasses. Another audition day on the world's most watched talent show, and he felt the usual twinge of boredom creep in. He had seen it all before: the overconfident singers, the nervous amateurs, the hopeful kids who sang out of tune and expected miracles. Every week, the cycle repeated, dreams clashing with reality, hope fading in the harsh glare of judgment. The stage lights dimmed for a moment before shining on a lone figure in the center, a young man gripping a worn notebook like it was a shield. The crowd hushed, their excitement buzzing faintly through the air, and Simon's smirk crept onto his face automatically. Here we go. Another one, Abe, he thought, already bracing himself for the mediocrity to come. The young man took a deep breath, visibly trembling, and Simon couldn't help but notice it. Usually, that nervous energy meant disaster, off-key notes, forgotten lyrics, a public embarrassment. But there was something in the way the young man's hands clenched the notebook, something in the way he straightened his posture despite the obvious fear in his eyes. It was almost human. Vulnerable, raw, real, and that gave Simon a flicker of curiosity he didn't expect. The first few chords of Elvis's iconic song rang out crisp and clear from the young man's small amplifier. Simon's smirk widened slightly, amused. He had seen dozens of performers tackle Elvis, some with reverence, most with shallow imitation, all inevitably disappointing. Here it comes, Simon murmured to himself. Another one, Abe trying to fake greatness. But then something subtle shifted. The young man's voice entered, soft at first, almost whispering. Simon almost laughed. He could feel the audience leaning forward, some whispering among themselves, wondering if the boy would survive the first few lines. The tone was shaky, unpolished, a far cry from the confident, practiced audition Simon was used to critiquing. And yet there was a spark in it, an honesty that immediately made Simon pause. He leaned forward slightly in his chair, the smirk lingering but now tinged with intrigue. This wasn't the rehearsed, polished performance he had expected. This was a voice carrying the weight of real life, of real struggle. It trembled with nervousness, yes, but underneath that tremor was a quiet strength, a story begging to be told. Simon watched, almost involuntarily, as the young man began to settle into the song. The notes grew steadier, more confident, more alive. His voice wasn't just singing Elvis, it was telling a story of someone who had faced hardship, of someone who had kept dreaming when life had tried to shut the door. Each note seemed to carry pieces of his journey, the exhaustion of long nights working odd jobs, the hope that kept him moving forward, the quiet longing for something bigger, something beautiful. The audience, sensing it too, began to lean in. Murmurs of surprise spread like wildfire through the theater. People's eyes glistened, some held back tears, others exchanged stunned glances. Simon's smirk faltered. He had seen many performers command attention, but this felt different. It wasn't just talent, it was truth, raw and unfiltered. The kind of truth that bypasses skepticism and hits straight at the heart. He realized then that he had underestimated the young man. That smirk, once a shield against another failed performance, now felt out of place. It was a mask he had worn so long in the face of endless mediocrity, but here, in this moment, it no longer fit. Simon felt a strange mix of emotions he didn't usually allow himself: curiosity, admiration, and something softer, almost protective. The young man's hands gripped the notebook tighter, and Simon noticed the slight shake in his voice when he hit a high note. But instead of faltering, he pushed through, letting the emotion pour out, unpolished yet undeniably powerful. Simon's gaze softened. He could see it clearly now. This wasn't about technical perfection. This was about courage, about stepping onto a stage, risking ridicule, and sharing a piece of yourself with the world. Something Simon had forgotten about in his years of judging. The sheer bravery it took to show up when the odds were stacked against you. The audience's reaction grew louder, their energy filling the theater in waves. Simon, for the first time that day, felt a tension in his chest, not from judgment but from anticipation. He wanted to see how far this young man could go, how much more of himself he could pour into the song. The smirk that had greeted him moments ago faded entirely, replaced by something new: a spark of respect. A memory flickered briefly in Simon's mind, a time when he too had stepped onto a stage unpolished, untested, dreaming that someone would believe in him. He hadn't seen the audience then as an adversary, but as a chance, a possibility. And now he realized that this young man, trembling under the spotlight, was experiencing that same fragile hope. The chords continued, and Simon felt something he rarely admitted: a lump in his throat. His professional detachment, honed over years of judgment and critique, began to crumble. Here was a voice that couldn't be measured solely by pitch or tone or style. It had a heartbeat, a life, a story of perseverance. And in that moment, Simon understood something profound. This was why people came to see talent shows, why millions watched week after week. It wasn't about flawless performances, it was about connection, about glimpsing the courage and humanity that exists in all of us, waiting for the chance to shine. The first few lines of the song ended, and the young man took a small, nervous breath, eyes flicking toward the judges' panel. Simon met his gaze not with a smirk, not with mockery, but with recognition. recognition of effort, of bravery, of heart. Simon had expected another forgettable audition, another fleeting moment of entertainment. Instead he had witnessed the opening act of something extraordinary, and for the first time that day, Simon felt a shift, not just in his opinion of the performer but in himself. The smirk he had worn so naturally melted entirely, leaving behind an unexpected sense of anticipation. He wanted to hear more. He wanted to understand this voice, this story, this courage, because something told him, something deep and undeniable, that this young man was not just performing a song, he was sharing a piece of his soul. And Simon, for the first time in a long while, was ready to listen. The theater seemed to hold its breath as the young man's next note floated into the air. Simon, still leaning forward in his chair, felt an unusual tension knotting in his chest. The first few seconds of his smirk had vanished, replaced by something he couldn't quite name, curiosity, perhaps, or maybe the beginnings of admiration. He had expected mediocrity. What he got was something alive, something raw. The young man closed his eyes, letting the music flow through him instead of controlling it. At first his voice trembled again, hesitant, almost fragile, like a candle flickering in a gust of wind. But then, almost imperceptibly, it strengthened. The vulnerability remained, but it was now fused with emotion, with heart, with a story. Each note carried weight, not the polished perfection of a studio recording, but the authenticity of someone who had lived, who had felt deeply, who had longed fiercely. Simon's smirk had completely vanished. He found himself leaning forward, elbows on the armrest, eyes fixed on the stage. The audience too had shifted. Some were sitting straighter, others leaning forward, all ears straining to catch every inflection. There was a hush, a kind of sacred silence that only forms when people are witnessing something honest, something that reaches beyond talent into the realm of soul. And then came the moment that truly shocked him. The young man hit a high note, and it wasn't just the pitch, it was the emotion behind it. There was pain in that note, but also hope. There was struggle, but also triumph. It was as though every hardship, every long night spent working for a living while chasing a dream, every small heartbreak, had coalesced into that single moment. The sound was not just heard, it was felt. Simon felt a lump in his throat, and he wasn't sure if he wanted to wipe it away or let it remain. His audience, the other judges, even the producers, all of them seemed caught in the same unexpected spell. No one laughed, no one fidgeted, no one whispered jokes to cover nervousness. They simply listened. And they felt. The young man's hands gripped the notebook harder now, but it was no longer a shield, it was a talisman. Every line of lyrics was sung not because it was expected or rehearsed, but because it had meaning, because it mattered. And as he sang, Simon felt something stir inside him that he hadn't experienced in years. He felt the power of connection, the reminder that music, and kindness and humanity, was more than performance. It was shared emotion, the invisible thread that ties strangers together in a moment of recognition. Simon's eyes darted across the audience, and he could see it everywhere. A mother brushed tears from her cheek, a teenager clutched a friend's hand, eyes wide. Even some of the critics in the back, known for their stone-faced judgments, had softened. Something extraordinary was unfolding, something Simon hadn't expected in his cynical little bubble of the industry. And then, something even more surprising happened. The young man, almost instinctively, began to engage with the audience. He didn't speak much, just small smiles, small nods, but it was enough. It wasn't theatrics, it was genuine. He seemed aware of their presence, their attention, and instead of letting it intimidate him, he let it lift him. The song grew in intensity, richer in texture, deeper in emotion. His voice carried the highs and lows of human experience, and Simon realized, with a jolt, that he had never truly heard anything like this before, not on this stage, not in countless auditions over the years. Simon's mind raced. He thought of every time he had judged too quickly, every time he had dismissed someone because their initial performance seemed unpolished, every time he had smirked and moved on. And here was proof that sometimes brilliance hides behind nervousness, behind tremors, behind small-town obscurity. Sometimes it takes courage to even step on the stage, and courage alone could be the difference between a forgettable moment and a transformative one. The young man hit another high note, but this time it was softer, more intimate. Simon felt the emotion not just in his ears but in his chest. It was as though the performer was singing to him, to the judge who had smirked, the world that had doubted, the countless people who had been overlooked, underestimated, or dismissed. And Simon realized that the song wasn't just about talent, it was about hope, about persistence, about the human spirit refusing to be ignored. The audience erupted in applause, but the young man didn't break. He stayed in the song, finishing with a line that trembled on the edge of vulnerability and strength. And then, silence. Not awkward silence, reverent silence, the kind of silence that comes after witnessing something extraordinary, when the room collectively feels the magnitude of what has just occurred. Simon's heart raced, and for the first time in years, he felt that old thrill, the thrill of witnessing real talent, real courage, real humanity. He looked at the young man, and for the first time, his thoughts were not of judgment or critique, but of admiration, of respect, of wonder. How had he gotten here? How had he hidden this gift under so much uncertainty? The young man opened his eyes slowly, scanning the room with a shy, hopeful gaze. Simon found himself leaning even closer, heart pounding. He had to see this moment through, not as a critic, but as a human being witnessing another human being reveal themselves fully. He had to witness what courage could do when paired with heart. And then it hit him: this wasn't just a performance. It was a message, a reminder, a glimpse of something the world often forgets in the rush of cynicism and judgment, that even in a fleeting moment, a single act of bravery could resonate, could inspire, could transform. And Simon, who had smirked mere seconds ago, realized with a shock that he had been blind, not to talent, but to the power of authenticity, to the quiet heroism of someone daring to be themselves on a world stage. The young man finished the song with a quiet flourish, the final note lingering in the air like a soft promise. The crowd held its collective breath for a beat longer, then erupted in a wave of applause and cheers. Simon sat frozen, hands gripping the armrests, heart pounding. He had smirked at what he thought was mediocrity. And in seconds he had been shocked into realizing that courage, truth, and heart were far more powerful than polish or perfection. He knew in that instant that this audition was different. That this young man, who had walked nervously onto the stage clutching a notebook, had not just performed a song, he had performed a miracle of human spirit. Simon's smirk was gone. In its place was all respect, and an anticipation he had not felt in years. After the performance, the stage lights dimmed, leaving a hushed murmur among the audience. Cameras backstage captured the young man wiping sweat from his brow, his hands still trembling slightly, and the notebook clutched close to his chest. Simon remained seated, stunned, replaying the performance in his mind. The voice, the emotion, the courage, it was all so vivid that he couldn't shake the feeling that this was more than just a performance. This was someone's life laid bare in song. Backstage producers prepared a short video segment to introduce the contestant's story. Simon, curious despite himself, leaned forward, eyes fixed on the screen. The first images appeared: a modest home in a small town, a kitchen where a middle-aged woman stirred soup while her son washed dishes at the counter, a worn-out car parked outside. The voiceover began, and with it, Simon's perspective shifted completely. The young man's name was Alex. He lived with his mother, who had been battling a chronic illness for several years. His father had passed when he was young, leaving him to grow up fast and take on responsibilities that most teenagers never face. Simon watched Alex moving through his day, working tirelessly at a local diner to cover bills and provide care for his mother, yet still finding moments to practice his music. The cameras caught him sneaking into the storage room during a slow lunch shift, strumming his guitar and humming quietly, his eyes closed as if the music itself were a shield against life's burdens. He wrote lyrics in his tattered notebook, scribbles of dreams and hope, lines about love, struggle and perseverance. Simon saw the determination in his eyes, the quiet defiance of someone who refused to let hardship define him. As the segment continued, Alex spoke directly to the camera, his voice soft but steady. He talked about the sacrifices he made, the nights he went without sleep to care for his mother, the long hours spent at work that left him exhausted yet unbroken. Music, he said, was the only time he felt truly free. It was the one place where he could express himself, where he could feel alive, where he could imagine a world bigger than the one he lived in. Simon felt a lump in his throat. He had judged so many performers in his career, critiqued so many voices, and dismissed so many people as untalented. Yet here was someone whose talent and heart were inseparable. Alex's singing wasn't just entertainment, it was survival, it was resilience, it was hope embodied in melody. The story continued to unfold. Simon watched Alex at the diner, serving customers with a wary smile, greeting regulars who knew him by name, managing trays of coffee and plates of food while hiding exhaustion behind his polite demeanor. He saw Alex pause occasionally, fingers lingering on a guitar pick tucked in his pocket, a subtle reminder of his passion and purpose. Simon realized that this young man's entire life had been a balancing act: work, care, dreams, and the relentless pressure of responsibility, and yet he had made it here, standing on a national stage, risking vulnerability in front of millions. Simon's mind drifted back to the audition stage. He thought about the subtle tremor in Alex's hands, the hesitant glances, the quiet nervousness that preceded every note. It wasn't fear, it was courage. Courage born from experience, from hardship, from the kind of life that forces someone to grow stronger than their years suggest. Simon felt a pang of guilt. His initial smirk, his dismissal, felt small and shallow in the face of this story. The video then cut to a scene of Alex practicing late at night in his room, a single lamp casting a soft glow over the worn notebook and guitar. His mother's cough echoed faintly from the other room, a reminder of the stakes he carried every day. Alex sang softly, notes trembling at first, then growing in confidence as he lost himself in the music. Simon watched mesmerized, feeling a connection he hadn't anticipated. It wasn't just the talent that impressed him, it was the unwavering dedication, the selflessness, the refusal to give up despite the obstacles stacked high. This was someone who had known hardship intimately and had chosen not to be defeated. Someone who had chosen to create beauty in the face of struggle. Simon's usual analytical mind struggled to keep up with the raw humanity he was witnessing. The video ended with Alex looking directly at the camera, a quiet, hopeful smile on his face. He spoke simply, without drama, "I don't have much, but I have this, and I want to share it with the world. Even if it's just one person who listens and feels it, it's worth it." Simon leaned back in his chair, eyes misty. That simple statement carried more weight than any performance he had ever judged. It was humility and courage combined, the kind of authenticity that couldn't be taught or faked. He felt a strange warmth spreading through him, a realization that his role as a judge wasn't merely to critique, it was to witness, to recognize, to honor the bravery of someone willing to bare their soul. He glanced at the other judges. Some had already seen the segment, and their expressions mirrored his own, a mix of astonishment, admiration, and awe. Simon knew that moments like these were rare, that true talent paired with true heart didn't appear on stages every day. He understood, suddenly and profoundly, that Alex wasn't just auditioning for a show. He was auditioning for the recognition of his effort, his courage and his humanity. Simon's mind replayed the notes from the performance, each one now enriched with context, each one carrying the story of a young man who had lived life with responsibility, sacrifice, and unyielding hope. The tremor in Alex's voice was no longer weakness, it was history, hardship, and resilience manifested in sound. The pauses, the slight stumbles, the subtle hesitations, they were not flaws, but authenticity, a testament to a life fully lived despite adversity. And in that moment, Simon realized the truth: judging was not just about talent or skill. Sometimes, it was about seeing the courage behind the voice, the story behind the performance, the person behind the music. And Alex's story, so full of struggle and hope, demanded to be seen, to be honored, to be recognized. Simon's heart swelled with a mix of admiration and empathy. He wanted to reach out, to somehow let Alex know that he was seen, that his bravery mattered, that his voice had touched hearts beyond imagination. It was the rarest of moments, a convergence of talent, courage, and humanity that left Simon feeling both humbled and inspired. The segment ended and the stage crew called Alex back for the judge's response. Simon stood slowly, his earlier smirk completely replaced by a quiet reverence. He had expected another ordinary audition. Instead he had witnessed a story of perseverance, sacrifice and hope come alive in song. And in those few minutes, Simon understood something he had long forgotten, that the world's brightest lights often emerge from the darkest struggles, and that recognition, kindness, and belief could transform a life in ways that talent alone never could. As Alex walked back onto the stage, exhausted yet radiant, Simon knew that his decision in the next few moments wouldn't just affect a performance. It might very well change the trajectory of a young man's life. And for the first time in a long while, Simon felt not like a critic, but like a witness to something truly extraordinary. Alex returned to the stage, clutching his worn notebook as though it were both armor and talisman. His palms were sweaty, his heart still racing from the adrenaline of the performance, but his eyes held a quiet determination. He had bared himself in song, shown the world a fragment of his life, and now all he could do was wait. Simon, seated in his black leather chair, stared at him with an intensity that surprised even himself. His earlier smirk had vanished completely, replaced by a mix of awe and reverence. He could still feel the echoes of Alex's voice resonating in his chest, each note a pulse of raw emotion. This was no longer about entertainment or ratings. This was about a human being, courageously standing under the harsh glare of the spotlight, risking everything for a moment of authenticity. The other judges had already shown signs of emotional impact, but Simon felt it most profoundly. He had spent years perfecting a persona sharp, witty, occasionally cutting, designed to impress and entertain millions. He had hidden behind critiques and jokes, never allowing vulnerability to surface. But here, now facing Alex, he felt his defenses crumble. The boy had exposed more humanity in a single performance than Simon had witnessed in decades on this stage. Simon's hands trembled slightly as he reached for his buzzer. It wasn't a reflexive motion this time, it was deliberate. He had a choice to make, and he knew instinctively that this moment carried weight far beyond the usual judgment. He could reject, like so many before him, with a critique measured in seconds, a dismissal in a single word, or he could act, to recognize, to believe, to change a life. He pressed the buzzer, but not to reject. The red X that usually spelled doom remained unlit. Instead, the panel flashed a brilliant green light, the symbol of an overwhelming yes, and Simon's signature voice rang out. "That was extraordinary, truly extraordinary. You have something rare, something the world needs to hear." The audience gasped, then erupted in applause. Alex froze for a moment, disbelief etched across his face. The tears he had held back threatened to spill. Simon could see it in the way his body stiffened, in the way his lips quivered, in the faint tremble of his hands. For seconds, time itself seemed suspended. Simon stood slowly, heart pounding, as the full weight of the moment settled over him. This wasn't just about the performance, it was about the life Alex had lived, the sacrifices he had made, the courage he had shown in the face of adversity. And now, Simon had the rare privilege, and responsibility, of acknowledging it. "Do you know what you just did?" Simon asked, his voice unusually soft, almost trembling. "You reminded everyone here what courage looks like. You reminded us that life isn't always perfect, but that bravery, heart, and honesty can shine through even the darkest moments." Alex blinked, overwhelmed, words failing him. He had imagined this day countless times, but never with Simon, the judge who had smirked at his first note, looking at him with admiration instead of judgment. It was surreal, almost dreamlike. Simon continued, leaning forward, his eyes locked on Alex's. "You have a gift, not just a voice but a story, and it's time the world heard it." Then, the moment of transformation arrived. Simon, with a smile that was rare and genuine, extended an invitation that left the young man utterly speechless. "I want you to perform live with a world-renowned orchestra on our upcoming special. Not just for the show, but for the world to see what you can do. I believe in you, Alex, and I think millions will too." For a moment the words hung in the air. Alex's knees felt weak, and he gripped the notebook so tightly it threatened to tear. Tears spilled down his cheeks, unrestrained now, streaming freely as he struggled to speak. His voice cracked as he finally managed to whisper, I don't know what to say. Thank you so much." The audience rose to their feet, cheering and applauding, but Alex barely noticed. All he could feel was a rush of disbelief, gratitude, and relief. The moment he had dared to hope for, the moment he had imagined through endless nights of practice and solitude, had arrived, and it was all real. Simon watched quietly, letting the applause wash over the stage, letting Alex absorb the recognition he had earned through years of struggle and perseverance. Simon's own emotions were raw and unfamiliar: pride, awe, and a deep, resonant respect for a human being who had proven that courage and heart matter far more than polish or fame. In that instant, Simon realized something profound. He had spent so much of his career judging talent, critiquing performances, dismissing dreams as impractical or misguided. And yet, here was a young man who had done what few ever dare. He had risked everything, faced vulnerability head-on, and shared a piece of his soul with the world. That alone was enough to command admiration, to inspire awe, to create a lasting impact. The orchestra, waiting offstage for the live special, sent a few members forward, shaking Alex's hand and offering smiles of encouragement. Simon stepped aside, giving the young man space to process what had just happened. He didn't need to comment further. The moment spoke for itself. Recognition, belief, and opportunity had converged, transforming fear into triumph in the span of seconds. Simon's heart swelled with warmth. He thought back to the smirk that had marked the very beginning of this audition. Seconds ago, he had dismissed Alex, as so many others might have. And now, he was witness to a miracle, not of magic or luck, but of human courage and resilience. It struck him how easy it is to underestimate someone, and how powerful a single act of recognition can be. One word, one gesture, one decision to believe in someone's potential, it could change the course of a life forever. Alex, still trembling, raised his head, eyes shining, and whispered a quiet thank you that seemed to carry not just gratitude but awe. Simon nodded, the motion subtle yet meaningful. No smirk, no sarcasm, just acknowledgement of a life transformed in that very instant. And as the audience continued to cheer, Simon realized something even more personal. This moment had changed him too. He had stepped outside the shield of cynicism, allowed himself to feel, and recognized the incredible human spirit in someone else. He had remembered why he started in this industry, not for fame, not for spectacle, but for moments like this, moments where human courage meets recognition, and the world becomes just a little brighter because someone dared to believe. Seconds after that, Alex allowed himself a smile, a genuine radiant smile that spoke of relief, hope, and a newfound belief in possibility. Simon felt a pang of happiness he hadn't known in years. He knew that this performance, this invitation, this recognition, would stay with Alex forever. And he knew that, in some way, it had changed him too. Because in that single moment of shock, of awe, and of pure human connection, Simon learned something profound. Sometimes, the smallest gestures, an acknowledgement, a vote of confidence, a simple belief in someone's potential, can ignite a transformation far greater than any judgment ever could. The orchestra members, the producers, and the audience watched Alex absorb the moment, tears glistening, hands shaking, but heart soaring. Simon leaned back, exhaling slowly, finally understanding that this was what it meant to witness true talent, true courage, and true humanity in motion. And in the quiet beat after the applause, he knew this was just the beginning of a story that would touch countless lives, because sometimes, all it takes is one person to believe. Months had passed since that unforgettable audition, but the memory remained vivid for Alex, for Simon, and for everyone who had witnessed it. Alex's life had transformed in ways he had only dared to dream about in his quiet late-night practice sessions. The performance with the world-renowned orchestra had aired on national television, reaching millions. People across the country were captivated not just by his voice, but by his story. The story of a young man who had worked tirelessly to care for his sick mother, who had pursued his passion despite exhaustion, fear, and doubt, and who had dared to share his soul through music. Simon sat in his office reviewing clips from the broadcast. He smiled quietly, a rare and genuine expression that lingered longer than the flashes of his usual sharp wit. Alex's performance had not only been a critical success, but it had touched the hearts of viewers in ways Simon hadn't expected. Letters and emails poured in, stories of viewers inspired to pursue long-forgotten dreams, to show kindness, to recognize courage in others. Simon leaned back in his chair, reflecting on the strange twist of fate that had brought him face to face with a voice and a story that had reminded him of the power of belief. Meanwhile, Alex's world had changed dramatically. The young man who had once walked nervously onto a stage with trembling hands now moved with quiet confidence. His mother's health had improved, thanks to a combination of treatment and the newfound financial stability from his performances and recording opportunities. Every day he still checked on her, still cooked, cleaned, and cared for her, but now he did so from a place of strength rather than desperation. The once small apartment they shared now held signs of hope and prosperity. The walls bore framed photographs of Alex performing, of audience members moved to tears, of moments captured during the live orchestra special. Yet, despite all the success, Alex remained humble. He never forgot the nights of exhaustion, the early mornings at the diner, the nights spent scribbling lyrics in the dim glow of a single lamp. Those moments had shaped him, grounded him, and made every note of music he sang resonate with authenticity and heart. One chilly morning Alex returned from a rehearsal, his guitar slung over his back. His mother greeted him at the door with her familiar warm smile. "You've made the world listen," she said, her voice proud but soft, "but don't ever forget where you came from." Alex nodded, feeling the weight and comfort of her words. He had indeed reached the world, but he had not lost himself in the process. Simon, meanwhile, was invited to attend one of Alex's live concerts in New York City. He arrived quietly, sitting in the front row, blending into the crowd, but watching intently as Alex took the stage. The lights dimmed, the audience hushed, and then Alex's voice rose, clear, soulful, and resonant. It was the same authenticity that had stunned Simon months ago, but now it was polished with confidence, shaped by experience, and infused with joy. Every note carried his journey, struggle, hope, sacrifice, love, and courage. As Alex sang, he occasionally glanced toward the front row, spotting Simon among the audience. Their eyes met for a fleeting moment, and Simon gave a subtle nod, a gesture of acknowledgement, respect, and pride. Alex's heart swelled. He realized that the man who had once smirked at his audition had become a supporter, someone who believed in him, someone whose recognition had helped transform not just his career but his life. After the concert, Alex met Simon backstage. The room was quiet away from the chaos of fans and media. Alex, still catching his breath from the performance, extended his hand, but Simon embraced him instead. There were no words at first, just a shared understanding of what had transpired between them over the past months. Finally Simon spoke, his voice warm, devoid of judgment. "Alex, watching you tonight, seeing how far you've come, it's extraordinary. You've reminded me why we do what we do, not just to find talent, but to witness courage, heart, and humanity." Alex's eyes glistened. "I never imagined any of this. I just wanted to sing, to share something real, and you believed in me." Simon smiled. "Belief is a powerful thing. Sometimes it changes lives, not just yours, but mine too. You've reminded me that even in a world filled with skepticism, one person's courage can make everyone pause, can make us remember what truly matters." The two men stood in silence for a moment, a shared respect passing between them. Then Alex spoke again, a soft laugh escaping him. "You know, when you smirked at me that first second, I thought I'd failed. I never imagined that would be the start of something so incredible." Simon chuckled, a genuine sound that filled the room. "Funny how life works, isn't it? Sometimes, what seems like mockery is the beginning of transformation. Sometimes all it takes is the right moment, the right person noticing you, to change everything." In the months that followed, Alex continued to perform, not for fame or fortune, but for the love of music and the desire to inspire others. His story was shared widely, motivating countless people to pursue their passions, to recognize courage in others, and to never underestimate the potential hidden behind a nervous smile or trembling hands. Simon, too, felt transformed. He approached his role as a judge with renewed perspective, seeing not just talent but humanity in every performance. He smiled more genuinely, listened more deeply, and understood that the greatest impact often comes from belief, kindness, and the courage to recognize someone else's potential. One evening, as Alex performed a quiet, heartfelt song at a small charity event for underprivileged children, he paused mid-performance to speak. "Sometimes life is hard," he said softly, "and sometimes the world doubts you. But courage, persistence, and kindness can light a path even in the darkest times. And sometimes all it takes is one person believing in you to change your world." Among the audience, Simon nodded, tears glistening in his eyes. He remembered the smirk that had started it all, the shock that had followed, and the incredible journey that had transformed both their lives. It was a full circle moment, a testament to the power of humanity, empathy and recognition. As the final note lingered in the room, Alex looked out at the crowd, a radiant smile on his face. He saw faces filled with hope, with admiration, with inspiration, and he knew in that moment that every sacrifice, every challenge, every moment of doubt had been worth it. He had shared his heart, and in return, the world had opened its arms to him. Simon, standing in the back, watched quietly. He felt gratitude not just for witnessing Alex's rise, but for the reminder that human connection, belief, and kindness are far more powerful than criticism or cynicism. He had learned that sometimes a single act of recognition, a single moment of compassion, could change a life, and in doing so, change the hearts of everyone who witnessed it. The concert ended, but the story did not. Alex's journey continued, a life transformed not only by talent, but by courage, selflessness, and the extraordinary human power of belief. And Simon, for the first time in a long time, understood that the smallest gestures, acknowledgement, encouragement, faith in someone's potential, could ripple outward, creating hope, inspiration, and joy in ways no one could ever predict. As the lights dimmed and the audience filed out, Simon smiled, a genuine, heartfelt smile. Alex had sung a song that no one would forget, and in that song, Simon had found a reminder of the world's best kind of magic, the magic of believing, of recognizing, and of allowing courage and kindness to transform lives.